Welcome to Cyclone InCYders. Today's episode, we've got men's basketball, women's basketball, and wrestling, along with the other Cyclone headlines. I'm Taylor Mankle. I'll be hosting here tonight, and with me right now, we've got Garrett Kroeger to my right, a special analyst tonight, as well, not only is he knowledgeable on all sports, that you can find him on KURA Sports, especially on Thursday, Clone Zone. Check it out. He's also Cyclone fanatic writer. He has beats for women's basketball, wrestling, and now he's doing a lot of football here in the spring, so make sure to check out Garrett Kroeger. What's your Twitter, Kroegs, so they can find you?
@GKroegs.
@GKroegs. You can find him on Twitter. Then we've got Ben Olson to my left. Ben Olson, new to the ISU TV sports team, starting to get all kinds of experience throughout. We've had him at men's games, women's games, all kinds of stuff. We're going to start talking today about the men's team here in Cyclone Athletics, and we're going to start with some awards. Iowa State got quite a few of them here just recently in Big 12 awards, those being. We'll talk about the snub of Monte Morris and the Cousy Award just a little later, but let's talk about these awards. So you have Monte Morris, first team All Big 12, Naz Meeter-Long, second team All Big 12, Deontay Burton, third team All Big 12, and then Matt Thomas, honorable mention All Big 12. So anything stick out, anything shocking, anything you think should have been higher or lower? What do you think, Ben?
I agree with all of the placements pretty much for the most part. I think the one that stood out to me the most would probably be Deontay Burton making the third team. You could make an argument that he could be right up there with the second team, considering when he's on his game, Deontay is just as important to the Iowa State team as any of the players listed.
Sure.
I think Monte was a surefire first teamer. Glad he made it on there. And Naz, really, I think getting some credit for his long career at Iowa State from the other voters getting put on second team. But otherwise, I mean, no surprises. Good to see 4 Cyclones on there, though.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely Cyclone-filled. Garrett, what are your thoughts on the awards for Cyclones?
I definitely agree with Ben. Monte was very well deserved getting that first team. You could definitely make the strong argument that Deontay could have been a second team Big 12 player because
he's so on and off.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why he got third team instead of the second team. Also with Naz coming on, like after that kind of rut, nobody kind of really expected him to be probably get all Big 12 team, but seeing him getting that second all Big 12 team after the way that he finished the season was very good.
Now let me ask you guys, the starting 5 for the Big 12, let me try to recall it. It's Frank Mason, Monte Morris, Jawan Evans, Jonathan Motley, and then
I think
Jackson. Yeah, Josh Jackson of Kansas. Could that starting 5 beat, say, the first team ACC?
Ooh.
I believe so. I think the Big 12 is the strongest conference in college basketball this year. And, I mean, you look at that lineup and consistent in every spot in my mind.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say that they're the best conference this year. There have been times that I've thought that the Big 12 is the best conference in college basketball this year. Right now, I don't think I'm in that boat, but I do think that these 5, with the experience they have from a lot of them, and with the only thing could be potentially the height in the backcourt would potentially be a problem, but then you've got Jonathan Motley out there who just destroys everyone. But regardless, I think they have a chance to compete with any starting 5 of all big teams. What do you think?
I definitely agree that they can compete. I don't think they could beat the ACC starting 5, though, because, like as you mentioned, the height might be kind of a disadvantage because you kind of look, Juwan Evans, just 6 foot flat. Monte's just like 6 foot flat. Frank is on the shorter side, I believe, like 5'11" or 5'10", pretty short. Then Jonathan Motley's like the tallest at 6'8", and then Josh Jackson is like 6'8", which is probably the potential thing that could hurt him, obviously, because you look at the ACC, I think Meeks from North Carolina probably made it. I'm assuming here did not really see it, but like he's like 6'11", so the height of like other all-conference teams could definitely do him in. However, small ball has been working as of late. So
small ball has been working, but the other argument you could potentially go is, there really isn't a quote-unquote shooter on that team, and that's become such a integral part to not only the college game but also the NBA game these days. That could potentially be a Big 12 downfall, but it's all hypothetical regardless.
I mean, Frank, as of late, he's been kind of more of a shooter than he is.
That's true. He shot more. I wouldn't consider him an outside shooter, though.
Yeah, no.
That's not necessarily. I wouldn't consider that his number one place in the game. And neither is Juwan Evans, and Monte Morris has his percentages, but again, wouldn't consider him a shooter. So out of these 5, will all 5 play in the NBA, Ben?
I believe that all 5 definitely have a pretty good chance. I think, unfortunately, out of all 5 of them, Monte might be the most questionable.
Yeah.
Of course, Juwan Evans is still only going to be a junior next year. He's only a sophomore this year, I believe.
That's crazy.
So, I mean, if he stays, he could just dominate the Big 12.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how long he's at Oklahoma State. But, yeah, definitely potential for 5 NBA talents right there. Unfortunately, we'll just see what the NBA thinks of like guards with potential, but maybe they're looking for taller guys now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think the least likely out of those is probably Monte Morris. What do you think, Garrett?
Yeah, I have to go make it 3 as charm here, but unfortunately, I don't think Monte, like, he has a chance to play in the NBA. Maybe NBA D-League might be like his ceiling there. I believe that Frank Sasso's ceiling is also the NBA D-League. I see him more as kind of like European guards, because if you look at the NBA, typical like great college guards don't really translate to the NBA game these days. It's all about potential, and if you stayed like all the way 4 years, you typically don't really get a shot in the NBA anymore. So I see those 2 probably just going over to Europe or anything, and I believe Motley, he sees as a first rounder, Jackson as a first rounder. Last time I saw, Evans was a second rounder, so he can definitely come back and probably raise the stock a little bit because he was an early second rounder. But I see like the potential for all 5, but I don't see them all sticking though.
Okay. And now let's mention, staying on Monte Morris. We were just talking before the program, the Bob Cousy Award finalist for Best Point Guard in college basketball came out, and Monte Morris didn't make the final 5. What are your thoughts on that, Ben?
Yeah, like you said, beginning of the show, I think it's a definite snub on his part. Unfortunately, Monte's got the stats. When you look at the Cousy Award, in my opinion, of course, Bob Cousy was the great point guard, and Monte is the truest point guard you can find in the game.
I would agree.
So, as far as criteria for the award, I think he was, at least being a finalist, completely deserving. Do I believe that him playing for Iowa State makes a difference? Yes, I definitely do. And that's definitely becoming a part of college basketball nowadays, though. So we're going to call it a snub. Other people might think that his level of competition that he was playing against wasn't the same. But, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm totally with you where the point guard aspect, how do you define point guard these days, has changed over the years. And I think Monte Morris embodies what I think of a point guard, at least someone who distributes the ball well, can manage a game well, and can still make shots at crucial times. That's what Monte Morris has done this year, and has done for 4 years. So that being said, I think it was a total snub from at least the final 5. I'm not saying he has to win the award, because I think the year that Frank Mason is having is above anyone else. But regardless, I think he was snubbed from that list. What do you think, Garrett?
Definitely agree. I saw somebody put it best. Monte Morris being off the Cousy Award list is when it's like a point guard dribbling off his foot and going out of bounds. That's how bad it is. Because, like, looking at the stats between all of them, because Gonzaga's point guard made it, Villanova's point guard made it, Joel Berry from UNC made it, Lonzo Ball obviously made it, and then Frank Mason made it. Those are the 5 point guards.
Those are 5 marquee teams.
Yeah, those are 5 marquee teams. So it's more kind of like, oh, you play for the national powerhouse, you play for these good teams, there you go, you're on that list.
That's true.
And, like, if you stack them up, Monte was far better than the Villanova point guard Brunson by every single stat. Like, he had the best assist-to-turnover ratio and everything.
Ever.
So, yeah, ever, obviously. And, like, had more rebounds and, like, more steals per game than most of the point guards on that list. So, obviously, big snub. They didn't really get it right there.
Yeah, I agree.
You mentioned the definition of point guard changing, and you just listed Lonzo Ball was on that finalist list. I would not consider him a point guard, and I'm sure if you looked in past years, he couldn't have been a Cousy finalist, but that just goes to prove that.
That's where point guards are going. You look at, James Harden in the NBA, Russell Westbrook in the NBA. Point guards who, look 15 years in the past would be considered shooting guards.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. That's the nature of the beast now. But let's move on to the Big 12 tournament coming up in just a couple of days, as Iowa State will be a part of it, and all the rest of the Big 12 teams will be in Kansas City Really a great tournament, great host in Kansas City at the Sprint Center. Great time. Hopefully a bunch of you guys will be down there to enjoy it. Even be a little warmer than it will be here over spring break, so maybe you can enjoy it there. But we'll start off just breaking down the whole tournament as a whole, and we'll start off with day one. You've got TCU, Oklahoma in the first matchup, then you've got Texas Tech and Texas. Out of these two, Garrett, which intrigues you more?
Definitely the TCU-Oklahoma matchup. Mostly because Texas Tech, it's been good. Texas has been very not great this year. I did not want to really trash them that bad. They've been the dumpster fire this year, really. I mostly like the TCU-Oklahoma matchup because Oklahoma, they had potential. Like, they've shocked a lot of people. They beat West Virginia in Morgantown, which is very hard to do. So they have the potential to probably make kind of like a tournament run here. And also TCU's kind of a budding program. Like, you see them this year, they put it together at times, and then also at times they've just been off and on. So it depends on what type of teams get there. I just love the matchup between the two. Yeah,
that's a very interesting matchup. Which intrigues you more?
I think the top of the Big 12 is very strong this year, so it's hard to pick seeing one of these teams moving far in this tournament. But I'm going to go the Texas Tech-Texas matchup intrigues me the most because, in my opinion, depending on how Texas Tech comes out and plays in the tournament, could make a difference into a possible upset because it's the best time of the year. It's March Madness. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think the way Texas Tech losing to Kansas by 1 at home, and then I believe they did have an upset of Baylor also in the year. And so, I mean, Texas Tech has hidden firepower, I believe, that we might see. Otherwise, TCU is probably the strongest team overall and most consistent out of that group.
Yeah, Texas Tech has played very well at home. I'd be interested to see how they play at Kansas City. They've beaten Baylor and West Virginia in Lubbock, Texas, so we'll see if they can translate that into Kansas City over in Hilton South. And speaking of Hilton South, Iowa State plays on day 2. That's March 9th in the quarterfinals. They will be taking on the early game, the 4 seed against the 5 seed in the Cowboys in Oklahoma State. Just saw that game what seems like just a week ago, and so with that being said, what do you think changes for the Cyclones here? Everybody's always saying, the cliche goes, it's hard to beat teams 3 times in one season. Iowa State going for the full sweep here in the Big 12 tournament. Just playing them last, does that give a leg up to the Cowboys, Kroeger?
Like, having recent film on the team definitely is beneficial for both teams, obviously. You can definitely look at, like, what you can fix for next time, which might give them a leg up, but it also gives a leg up on Iowa State.
Yeah.
It's a very neutral court, because like obviously a neutral court, it's supposed to be like taking out the home field advantage and everything. But with it, as you mentioned, kind of like Hilton South, I think it kind of that benefits Iowa State on this part because of the whole entire fans. I don't think Oklahoma State travels that well for basketball. And like they can hardly sometimes.
Have you seen Gallagher-Iba recently?
Yeah, they feel wrestling more.
Yeah, they feel wrestling more than some basketball games.
Than some basketball games. But this Oklahoma State team has the potential to beat anybody because like they won that very good run towards the late of this end of the year until Iowa State obviously broke their win streak.
Yeah.
And then with Juwan Evans, he has such a great athletic ability to like take over a game. Also, forgot his name for Oklahoma State, number 23 for them, who was just killing Iowa State out behind the three-point arc.
Is that Carroll?
Oh, God, I can't forget.
Oh, you mean the Forte?
No, not Forte. Oh. He's a taller dude.
Oh,
Like he was hitting threes. Like,
Hammond.
Like very surprising.
Hammonds,
yeah. His three-point shooting ability plus Forte's been there a long time. I can see this being kind of a toss-up, but with the Hill and South part, I'm going to go with Iowa State in this one.
Okay. Ben, what do you think about this matchup?
I like what Garrett was saying about, you look at what Iowa State is walking into. They've beat Oklahoma State twice, beat them at home, and Oklahoma State has been on fire to end the season. Of course, their last loss was Iowa State, but losing by 3 to Iowa State on senior night is not a bad loss by any means. So, they're going to want blood, so it's kind of a scary matchup. But I have some good news for Cyclone fans out there. I saw a stat on Twitter that says when a team is looking for their 3rd win of the year after they've won the first 2 matchups, in the past 10 years, that team has won 74% of the time. So I think, I agree with Garrett once again, that Hilton South can make the difference. The only other negative in my mind looking at this game is the 11:30 start for the Cyclones, which in previous matchups, Iowa State does not appear to be a morning team, but I'm still going to give them the notch ahead in this one.
Yeah, I really like how Iowa State matches up with Oklahoma State, and we've seen that in both matchups this year. Monte Morris does a fantastic job against Jawan Evans. He really is able to shut him down like most aren't in the Big 12 or in the nation, albeit. And I think the defense steps up against that team. If the offense can play a full 40 minutes, we didn't see that, but they were able to eke it out at home. If they can do that, I think they should have this game. Hopefully, we see a lot of Cardinal and gold down there in Kansas City to root on the Cyclones. Now let's quickly go on to the other matchup. Obviously, you got West Virginia that will play the winner of Texas Tech, Texas. We won't talk about that in Kansas. The winner of Oklahoma, TCU. But then you have the Baylor Kansas State game, the 3 versus 6 seed. Is there any way the Wildcats can get a much-needed NCAA booster here, Ben, against the Baylor Bears?
I believe so. I think like you said, keyword is much needed, and I believe that Kansas State knows that, and they've been so close to so many of the top teams in the Big 12 this year that I could easily see Kansas State going out there and putting some authority down on Baylor.
Yeah, they're going to need it, and they're going to need their fans down there as well. Do you think the Wildcats can get this win over Jonathan Motley and company?
They played well this year. Kansas State has hung around with a lot of the top-tier teams in the Big 12. However, the way they ended the season, not pretty against the top-tier teams.
No.
Like their only last 2 wins were against TCU and Texas Tech, and those are the bottom-tier teams of the Big 12. So I don't think they pull off the upset against Baylor. Even though I feel like they have a chance to, but I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough matchup, especially for Kansas State. Granted, I've said that against Iowa State and Baylor as well, but Iowa State was able to pull out 1 win and almost win on the road against Baylor. But the size of Baylor should make it nearly impossible for Kansas State to win. They've got DJ Johnson down there, but he can get in foul trouble a lot against those bigger teams. I think this is not a matchup that favors Kansas State, but I expect to see a lot of scrap and a lot of fight out of the Wildcats as they need this desperately if they want to make the NCAA tournament.
Crazy things happen in March.
That's exactly right. Crazy things do happen. But let's look a little further forward into March. I want to get your guys' most recent takes here on where you think the Cyclones should be placed in the big dance. Garrett?
If they're able to win the Big 12
give
tournament,
me some scenarios. Yeah.
If they're able to win the Big 12 tournament, I see Iowa State going top 4 seed.
So the highest they could be is a 4 seed.
Yep. I don't see them getting anything higher than that.
Yeah, that's pretty high.
But if they lose to Oklahoma State, I think they fall to a 7 seed. Because right now they're hanging around a 6 seed. If they're able to get to the finals and then lose, I see them maybe as a 5 seed.
Okay.
So anywhere in between the range of a 4 and a 7.
4 and a 7. What do you think the ceiling and the cellar, if you will, are for the Cyclones?
I would say the ceiling, I'm only going to go up to a 5 with the ceiling, but cellar probably an 8. And I agree with what Garrett said. I think if they lose to Oklahoma State, they're probably going to get a 7 seed. And then depending on how other teams do in their conference tournaments, they could drop to 8. But I think if they beat Oklahoma State and get that victory against Kansas, they're a lock for the 6 seed, and it wouldn't surprise me if they jumped up to a 5.
Yeah, that's how I've kind of mapped it out. If they lose to Okie State, they'll be dropped down to a 7. If they beat Okie State but lose the other game, they will probably be at that 6 where they're kind of slotted at now. If they win 2 games, including that win, which would, especially if it's Kansas, we'll say it is Kansas, I've got them moving up to a 5 seed. It's just basically the more you win, the more you move up. If they win the whole thing and eventually match up with West Virginia, it has to be West Virginia in the championship game, though, and they're able to knock off the Mountaineers, I think you're right, Garrett. I think that could give them the 4, and that's how I have this all scheduled out. But we will see how that all goes down as we are officially in March, one of the best times of the year, and we can't be more excited about it here on Cyclone InCYders. Best of luck to the men's team on their journey here in the upcoming Big 12 Championship. We're going to take a break, then come back, and we're going to talk some women's basketball, Iowa State women's basketball, coming up on InCYders.
When I was a young boy, my father took me into the city. to see a marching band. He said,
Tune into the midweek roundup with me, your host, Michael Morrell.
I'm Jacob Lee.
We are going to talk about all sorts of things like baseball, or even debate the fact that the Vikings are going to finish third in the NFC North this year.
They're going to win the North again this year.
Tim Weeman, host of the Sound of the Storm.
Connor Ferguson.
Hunter Smith.
Talk about all college sports and NFL, MLB, and our Storm is definitely brewing.
I'm Blake Akery, and I'm the host of the Sports View.
And I'm TJ Reed.
We talk college basketball and NBA.
And all things Iowa State.
Tim Weeman.
Patrick Stanek.
Hank Zimmerman.
Tune into the weekend pregame as we warm up the sports weekend ahead, including many segments with Pick'ems and Tim's Trivia.
I'm Taylor Mankle.
I'm Mary Rominger.
I'm Andrea Safar.
And I'm Joey Mullins.
And we talk a lot of different sports here, including
NHL and Cyclone hockey.
World football.
American football.
basketball, and many other segments. Make sure to step into the Clone Zone.
I'm Michael Mainzer.
I'm Mary Rominger.
I'm Dylan Ryan.
And I'm Zach Williamson.
And this is Cyclone Talk. Listen in for live interviews and analysis from these guys.
Welcome back to Cyclone InCYders. Taylor Mankle back here as we're now transitioning over from men's basketball to women's basketball. Still all Cyclone sports all the time here on Cyclone InCYders. Garrett Kroeger stays with us here, and Mary Rominger here with us as well. Another women's basketball expert that will help us break down all of this. And of course, you were at the Big 12 Championship in Oklahoma City, looking at all the different games there. And if you want to see Mary's breakdown of the championship game against West Virginia and Baylor, big upset there, huge for West Virginia and their push towards the NCAA tournament, make sure to check out on our social media at ISU TV. We'll have it posted up there when you are looking for it. It's a great breakdown. Make sure to check it out there. And Mary, of course, for the good people out there, if they want to know your great journalism expertise, give them your Twitter out there so they can give you a follow.
Wow, I'm at Mary Rominger.
Oh, wow. It's just that easy, at Mary Rominger. So let's start breaking down this last game Iowa State had in the Big 12 Championship in Oklahoma City against the Kansas State Wildcats. They came in ranked into this one, and they have been a tough pill to swallow for the Cyclones all year. Split the series, both teams winning their respective games at home. Kansas State able to win this one in Okie City, 74-67. And man, it was huge for the Wildcats. And it's huge for anyone when you can basically just shut down Bridget Carleton. Mary, how'd the Wildcats do it?
Well, it was their game plan heading into the game. Shut down the three biggest players that Iowa State have. Top three scorers in the Big 12, which is unlike any other team in the Big 12 currently. So, that being said, their game plan going into it was they didn't want to lose to Iowa State's best players, and they made sure to not let them have a say in any way, shape, or form. Bridget Carleton was guarded pretty heavily. She did have a good amount of looks, though. I believe she went 2 for 11. Let me see here, 5 for 11. So she did see some balls, but she couldn't find the back of the net. She wasn't having the best of the night, but it didn't help that she was being guarded so heavily. And on top of that, Shauna Johnson got into some pretty nasty foul trouble in the first period, or in the first quarter. She had already 2 that kept her out of most of the second half. So that's already right there 2 of Iowa State's best players having no say in this game.
Yeah, and Garrett, obviously shooting struggles early on in this one for Iowa State and late in the fourth quarter really cost them. They had some good looks. They just couldn't make them count, especially Bridget Carleton, was it more the defense, or was Iowa State just not executing when they needed to?
It was kind of a little bit of both.
Okay.
Because as Mary mentioned, Kansas State did mention in the post-game press conference that their
That was their key,
plan was to take out Bridget Carleton and Jaya Buckley primarily, because those were the two that they seen as like their top 2 players.
Yeah.
And they were kind of pressuring Bridget a lot early on to kind of get her off the game early. And then, as Mary mentioned, she did get looks. It was just she wasn't able to put them in. I remember her going to the basket, it should have been an easy layup, but it was a missed bunny instead. So it was a little bit of that, plus kind of just like a cold shooting night for her.
Yeah.
Bill Finley kind of put it best. It's the nature of basketball. Everybody's had an off night, and unfortunately for Iowa State, Bridget Carleton, their best player, just had an off night.
Yeah, that's kind of how it goes in basketball sometimes, and we definitely saw that in Oklahoma City out of the Cyclones, in particular Bridget Carleton. But there were a couple shining stars, if you will, in this game for Iowa State to outline. Emily Durr played very well in this game, and she needed to. She took a lot of shots, but Iowa State really needed it out of Durr. Talk about Emily's play, Mary.
Yeah, Emily, it was really up to her. There was no one else for Iowa State to turn to other than her and Heather Bovey, really. Emily Durr went 7 for 22, and Heather Bovey went 6 for 14. I liked what I saw from Emily Durr. She knew how to step up, make those big 3-point shots. She had 5 for 16 in her shots beyond the arc, but she could have seen the net a little bit more. She, again, didn't have, with 21 points, it's really hard to say this, but in a big game like this, it would have been nice to see her get a little more of those shots in. But regardless, she had a great game, and really, when it's all up to her, she did what she needed to do. So
yeah, she definitely wasn't afraid to shoot the ball by any means. And Garrett, Mary mentioned Heather Bovey had a good game here, and she's really started to catch on a little more towards this latter half of the season. The offense is coming a little bit. She did miss some bunnies in that game, of course, but talk about her progression and how much she will mean for whatever postseason Iowa State plays in.
That's definitely a huge thing for this Iowa State team. Heather Bovey is one of the taller girls on this team, and they really don't have a post presence, but with her emerging as an offensive post presence for Iowa State, that can just add another dimension to this offense. This offense is already good enough with the 4 shooters that they have with Bridget Carleton, Emily Durr, Buckley, and Johnson. But adding that post presence down low against probably more teams that they're probably going to face in the tournament or in the ITU, because their postseason fate isn't determined yet. We'll get to that.
Yep.
And having her down low, being able to kind of get it going, because early on this season, she had her moments, and then there was moments that she was just a non-factor.
Yeah.
But having a 5-player rotation that is able to score at will, that's very beneficial, and especially down low as well.
If she can find consistency, that'll be huge for the Cyclones. Someone who hasn't been very consistent all year, Kayla Goff, decided to go off against the Cyclones. Fantastic outing from the Wildcat. Ended up with, 25 points in that game, Mary?
25
A fantastic output from Goff. Yeah, exactly. Off the bench, that's a huge part to it.
That was her career high, too.
Yeah, it was her career high, and Iowa State was really giving her open looks. That was part of the defensive scheme. She was just able to knock them down, and that was a huge part to the victory for Kansas State. Now let's talk about something that happened after the game. Of course, being at the press conference, just kind of some backstory on this. Jeff Mittie, the Kansas State head coach, was at the podium, and everyone was done asking questions. And the moderator was kind of telling him everybody can leave and all that kind of stuff. And then he decided to stop on his own dime and use this opportunity to say Iowa State should be an NCAA tournament team. And he spoke on how impressive it was to win at Texas, how impressive their season was, how they really don't have any bad losses. What do you think this says, say, to the committee, to Iowa State, to Bill Finley, the Big 12 camaraderie? What does this say to all that, Mary?
It shows you that obviously the team that took them out has immense respect for them and saw that the power that they do have in their lineup, they didn't allow Iowa State to show what they're truly capable of by shutting down their greatest players. But really, if you watch that game, it was a game, like Jeff Mittie said, that looked like a NCAA tournament game. It was an exciting game, one for the big bodies in the paint. Iowa State showed that they deserve to be there, and yes, they didn't have the shooting that they needed to have, but other than that, they are a fantastic team. They showed it. The big key here is they won on the road against Texas, and that will continue to define what they're capable of moving forward.
And that being said, Garrett, what do you think the current status of Iowa State's NCAA tournament odds are?
I still think they're in. I talked to Charlie Cream, who's the ESPN women's basketball bracketologist, last night, and because Iowa State was the only Big 12 team to sweep West Virginia all season.
Who just won the Big 12 tournament.
Who just won the Big 12 tournament. So asked him, does this affect their postseason chances to get in the NCAA tournament? Because he had them the last 4 in.
Yeah.
Because they did have that one stretch that they were just losing games, and he said it doesn't affect them.
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't boost their chances or decreases their chances. But if you let the other tournaments play out, he thinks it could help them tremendously. So he still believes they're in. So, and I still think they're in based on the Texas win, beating West Virginia twice, and also the Drake win.
Yeah, that's a huge win.
That's a huge win at the beginning of the season that people
huge.
thought wasn't just that be that okay win, but now it's looking as a resume.
Yeah, and people at the time were criticizing, why is this game so close? They should be blowing Drake out of the water. Drake's a fantastic team.
Very good.
Obviously, breaking into the top 25 in the first time in decades this year under a great program over there. Mary, what do you think? What's the current status? Are Iowa State in, or are they out, and why should they be in and out?
Yeah, no, Garrett just brought up some really cool points, and that's some really cool insight that I had no idea about in regards to their status in terms of having swept West Virginia, who won the championship.
Yeah.
But I say that their chances are very, very good. I don't think, obviously, it didn't help them not getting at least one win in the tournament. I said prior to this tournament that if they beat Texas and they won out on the season, they were good. And they came into the tournament with a 5-game winning streak, possibly 6. Was it 5?
It was
5. Getting the men's team mixed up. Both doing great right now. Regardless, Iowa State has proven to me that they're capable, and I think that the committee, if they, just like Jeff Mitty said, I have the words right here, if the eye test is true and anybody has 2 good eyes, that's an NCAA tournament team. And I agree, just look at what they did in this regular season.
And what do you think, Garrett, is the reason you could argue Iowa State should not be in the NCAA tournament?
Ooh, that's a hard one, but if you look at some of their losses, they lost to Texas Tech on the road.
Yeah, that's a bad one.
Well, they also lost to TCU on the road. Those 2 losses, plus not really closing out on the good games.
They had a tough time closing out early in the Big 12 season.
Closing out was very difficult because they could have beat Texas at home, could have beat Mississippi State at home.
Could have beat Okie State at home.
And Okie State at home. And those games could cost them in the end, obviously, because those were resume builders. But some of those bad losses, that stretch, that kind of looked like they weren't even going to finish sub 500 is probably a reason why they could probably say, no, sorry, you're not going to make the tournament. However, you can go to the women's NIT because they're obviously qualified for the women's NIT. It's just they're on the fringe of the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all in the same boat here, thinking Iowa State has made their case well enough to be in the NCAA tournament, but we all have to wait and see until Selection Monday. A long way for the Cyclones, indeed. And we're actually going to keep it right here and talk about a little wrestling with Garrett here, who is the special reporter for Cyclone Fanatic, joining us here on Cyclone InCYders. As you've been covering the wrestling team all year long, they just had the Big 12 championship themselves. That was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They too were in Oklahoma. And obviously it's been a tipsy-turvy season. I mean, things have not necessarily gone the way that people wanted them to, the way people thought they would. The firing or the stepping down of Kevin Jackson, however you want to put it, and the hiring of Visser. So Big 12s, break it down for us. Obviously only one getting the automatic bid for the Cyclones. Talk about the whole Big 12 tournament.
It was decent. For Iowa State, it was the first time since 2003 they didn't get anybody in the finals of that. However, Oklahoma State had all 10 wrestlers in the final, which is very impressive, by the way. Oklahoma State getting all 10 of their wrestlers in there. So it was kind of disappointing because you thought maybe Earl Hall or Leland Weatherspoon, who was a defending Big 12 champion, could make a comeback and get into the finals. However, they have been kind of let down. However, as you mentioned, Iowa State only got one automatic qualifier, and that's Marcus Harrington.
Yeah. Did you see that coming, Garrett?
I did not.
You did not see
I did not see that coming at all. And not going to lie, I thought it was the perfect representation. That is true. That is true too. But I thought it was a perfect
representation.
Yeah, representation.
There you go.
I cannot speak right now. Got a little bit too riled
Got
up.
flustered. Iowa State wrestling. You get flustered.
Marcus Harrington, if you don't know who that is, he's Iowa State's 197-pounder. He came in with very high accolades, very good recruit. However, he's been having a very up and down career at Iowa State. Never really got along with Jackson that much. Could never reach his full potential. But then all of a sudden in the Big 12 tournament, just somehow was able to get 5th place because they had 5 allocations, and he was able to do it. So he was the first one. But also today, NCAA Wrestling came out with the at-large bids, and Leland Weatherspoon and Earl Hall both made it. However, there was one snub that a lot of people thought should have gotten. That would be Iowa State's heavyweight wrestler, Keon Smith. His resume, compared to some of the wrestlers that got in, that got out large, there was like 4, I believe. He matched up very well with 2 of them, probably had better resumes than them. It was just very questionable, but as this season has gone on, very disappointing, which
not really surprising.
Not very surprising.
Yeah, it's not really surprising.
A wrestler not getting in because it's been a disappointing season.
Hasn't been a great season.
So they got 3, and I don't see them doing. I can see Earl Hall and Leland getting All-Americans again. I don't see. It depends on how Harrington shows up.
Which Harrington will show up?
Yes. If it's the Harrington that typically wrestles towards the end of a match, like throughout the 7 minutes, I don't expect him to do good. But because Harrington, he starts out very well in his matches, but once he starts getting down, he just throws in the towel right away. He doesn't really compete throughout the 7 minutes. But if he's able to compete like he does typically in the beginning throughout the whole entire 7 minutes, I can see him making some noise in March.
Okay, some noise in March for sure. We'll see what the Cyclones can do. A lot of March madness across all kinds of sports. Your special Cyclone other headline of today is the tennis team. They play Wyoming. That will be on Friday down in Urbandale. That's where they host their events this year after the whole changing of locations and whatnot. So make sure to check out the Cyclone tennis team as they will be facing off against Wyoming. They're currently on an 8-match winning streak. So hats off to the tennis team. But for Ben Olson, Mary Rominger, Garrett Kroeger, I'm Taylor Mankle, wishing you all a peaceful good night.